Greetings, lovely people, and welcome to Fast Track 4. Today we're going to be talking about Episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 3, The Streets of Mos Espa. So, of course, spoilers ahead for that episode, and yeah, roll that intro. So, the episode starts off with something that I quite like that they keep returning to. Is that initial starting shot of the spider monks or spider droids, or whatever you want to call them, around Jabba's palace. And I am going to continually call this Jabba's palace because realistically it is, even though, before Tina took it over and now Boba, it's still Jabba's palace, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as. But yeah, the initial shots that we pretty much have started every episode with so far of just Jabba's palace with spider droids and stuff, it's really nice. It's a nice reference to episode 6, and overall I just quite enjoy that look, especially the fact that we are getting to see so much of the spider droids, or spider monks, or whatever you want to call them, because they're a fun design. There's something that we didn't see too much of in episode 6. Expanded media has shown us a lot more of them, and quite honestly, it's nice that they're kind of taking the forefront of a lot of shots in this series. That's something that I just really like. But yeah, we are introduced to a moisture seller, I suppose, rather than a moisture farmer, someone who actually sells the water to people after buying it from the moisture farmers. And he states that the streets are in chaos because nobody actually is loyal to Boba. And this episode also opens with them talking about how the entirety of Mos Espa is actually split between 3 groups. It's not really looked into too much, but presumably it's just a case of, realistically, the mayor and whoever is in Jabba's palace doesn't have that much control over Mos Espa as it currently exists. It's a lot of different groups that just have kind of a neutrality truce between them, and it's a very interesting situation overall. We are then introduced to cyborgs in Star Wars, and this is something that we have seen before. We've had, characters that have had droid limbs and droid whatever else. But this is the first time where they've been, major aspects of anything Star Wars media, at least in canon. I know we've seen plenty of cyborg bounty hunters and stuff like that, and obviously characters like, the bandage head character from episode 5. I cannot remember his name, but he's a cyborg, and we have seen cyborgs in Star Wars, but this is the first time where they've actually been very obviously augmented humans with droid parts, and I think that's really interesting. The cyborg characters, cyborg rebels, whatever you want to call them, are all very cool and interesting characters. They all have very interesting augmentations. Some of them are offensive, some of them are defensive, and yeah, just generally, they're just very interesting looking. We have a kind of leader figure for the group who has a droid arm, which is very interesting. It's kind of done in a similar way to how the Phantom Pain does it. Metal Gear Solid 5, I believe. Phantom Pain and then the sequel to it have the very bright red robot arm, or I guess it's just a false arm, And yeah, it's all very good. It's all very cool. I really like having cyborgs in media and having them be pushed forward. Just like how I like the Spider Monks as a concept. Having cyborgs in Star Wars, it's always been a thing, but it's nice that we're finally getting them as forward-facing characters, characters that we actually get to spend time with. And yeah, essentially after the dispute around water prices and stuff like that, just some very Tatooine things in Star Wars. Boba then hires them, which is pretty cool. And it really adds up how Boba wants to be seen. He wants to be someone who the public will be loyal to because he's loyal to them. He is willing to hire those that don't have jobs. He's willing to support all those of any class within his system. And it's really kind of refreshing to see a dictator-type character like what Boba is kind of become a source of good, and it's just a really good mechanic. I'm really liking it. We're then treated to another back-to-tank scene with flashbacks to more visions of Kamino, which we've pretty much seen very similar shots to this in every episode so far. I feel like they're just reusing, with slightly different camera angles, the same CGI base for Jango Fett taking off and Boba just watching out a window. It's not the most interesting of Camino flashbacks, but eventually I'm sure it'll lead somewhere. And that also brings us back to the Tuscan flashback. So Boba leaves the Tuscan clan on the back of a bantha to go to Mos Eisley, which is referenced early in the episode. But yeah, we get to see Mos Eisley in all its glory, the real Tatooine setting that everyone knows. It's where the Mos Eisley Cantina is from episode 1, and generally it's really the main Tatooine location. Obviously we know Mos Espa very well thanks to all its other appearances, but yeah, Mos Eisley gets a good amount of play in this. We see Stormtrooper helmets on spikes, which is something we have seen in Mos Eisley, as well as many other locations thanks to the Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian. That I meant to say The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, but I said it the wrong way around. But yeah, it's seen Stormtrooper helmets being put on spikes after, the events of Episode 6. Very interesting, and generally just cool to see more, OT stuff. I know this is very much, along with Mandalorian, very much set in the time span of the original trilogy, but it's just nice to see actual physical reminders like Stormtrooper helmets. We see the Mando mechanic, who I don't know the name of, but the mechanic who looks after Grogu at various points, fixes up and refuels the Razor Crest, and has 3 pit droids. We do actually see her. She's just walking in the background. She's very much in focus, but she's just a background character, essentially, in Mos Eisley, which is where we meet her initially in The Mandalorian. So that's a very interesting little thing. Just a little bit of continuity, and I really enjoyed that. We are then shown the Pike Syndicate is the kind of main boss of Mos Eisley, I suppose, or in some way, just like the general area of the Dune Sea. And yeah, having Pikes be such a major part of this series is interesting because the Pike Syndicate was part of Crimson Dawn, which is obviously Darth Maul's entire syndicate, which I did mention in the last episode. So it is interesting that the Pikes are so integral, because that to me either says that the Crimson Dawn completely disbanded after the death of Maul, or even before that, potentially, or the Crimson Dawn is still very much active, with different territories being taken over by different aspects of Crimson Dawn. Because even when we see Crimson Dawn at its peak in things like the Clone Wars, Rebels, and, of course, the Bad Batch, it's very much a thing of only one of the syndicates that are part of the entirety of Crimson Dawn are ever in control of an area. We never see multiple syndicates working together unless under the actual control of Maul directly. Like, we see plenty of times where they are fighting alongside each other, but when it comes to controlling an area, it's usually pretty individualistic. So it's completely possible that the Pike Syndicate presence on Tatooine could be an extension of the Crimson Dawn, and I kind of hope that is how it's revealed. It'd be really interesting if Dathomiri are actually still in control of Crimson Dawn in some way, even though, for the most part, especially thanks to the events of Jedi Fallen Order, a lot of the Clone Wars and Rebels kind of just showing how Dathomir is kind of a wasteland of death and destruction, because the Separatists and various other groups, including the Empire, just kind of wiped them dry, because, quite honestly, Dathomiri witches and the like are very dangerous, and a lot of Sith come from there. It was very clearly a location that needed to be purged during the time of the Clone Wars and beyond, and slightly beyond it. Just an interesting point, though, that, Dathomiris do still exist. Jedi Fallen Order shows that there is actually a Night Sister still around, and quite honestly, it's very possible that any number of Dathomiri could have survived and be in control of the Crimson Dawn, maybe even a lookalike of Maul. That'd be very interesting if it was someone that is a pretender to the throne pretending to be Maul. I'm sure this could be something that is explored a bit more in the Obi-Wan series, but I don't know, maybe it's explored in this, who knows. And yeah, after the altercation with the Pike Syndicate, Boba comes back to the Tuscans to find that they've been slaughtered. And this is by the biker gang that we saw in episode 1, attacking some moisture farmers. And yeah, it's a very emotional scene. It's a very sad scene, all in all. We witness as Boba does essentially, Tuscan funeral, but Viking-style funeral for all the Tuscans that have fallen. and he then moves on. And that is pretty much where that flashback part actually ends. Mostly due to the fact that we have a Wookiee attack. Yeah, straight up Black Kirsten, which I called him, I can't remember what I called him in the last episode. I was referencing the video games and the novelizations and stuff, the stuff that isn't canon. Apparently, and I said that this could be the case, Black Kirsten, or Karsten, or however you actually pronounce it, they do say it in the episode, that is the character from the comics that are actually canon, and he is the Wookiee that is in this episode. So, yeah, I was wrong, and I'm more than willing to admit that. But yeah, Black Kirsten, a very interesting character to have back. I don't know much about them because I haven't read the comics, but, he's a Wookiee, he's pretty cool. And we have a pretty good fight with him, which actually leaves one of the Gamorreans badly injured, as well as kind of showing off the skill, I guess, of every other member of Boba's crew. All of the cyborgs get to have their moment of using their various skills, whether that be with blasters, with whips, with chains, with knives, and then Fennec gets the final hit by throwing a knife from her rifle at Kirsten's hand and trapping him into the Rancor pit, which, it's a very quick scene, and I don't think that the fighting was very good overall, but it was definitely an interesting little thing. And that brings us to the Hutts turning back, the twins return, and they give Boba a new Rancor, which is fascinating. And this also leads to the Hutts basically saying, yeah, the mayor's actually given claim to this land to a different syndicate. The Hutts aren't going to be bothered enough to actually work on this. And they also recommend that Boba also just gives up Tatooine because, and it does turn out it is the Pikes by the end of the episode, but basically it's not worth a war. And I'd quite agree with that. And the Hutts, for the first time ever, have actually made a very smart business decision because generally they don't make very good decisions. But yeah, they give Boba a new Rancor with a Rancor Keeper who is played by a very famous actor I just do not know the name of, and I'm really sorry, but he's very good in it. If you know who it is, you know who it is, and you know that he's very, very good. And yeah, we then have a nice scene with the actual Rancor talking about how they are actually kind of loving creatures if treated well, and the reason why they're Rancor Keepers and they're Rancor owners usually, not in the firing line of a Rancor, is because Rancors just imprint. They're just very friendly creatures, they're very loyal creatures, and they're basically just, dogs. They'll just kind of be attached to the people that treat them well, and not so to the people that treat them badly. So, yeah, Luke, you killed a sentient creature that was capable of feeling depressed. I hope you're happy. But yeah, we also get the line, which I kind of mentioned before, about how Witches of Dathomir, or Night Sisters as we normally call them, actually would ride Rancor, which is something from Extended Universe. I don't know if it's ever been actually said in canon. It's definitely something I've heard a lot, so it might have been. But I know it was definitely something that was in a lot of the novelizations prior to the Disney takeover. So that's a really interesting little bit of continuity, I suppose, of the Witches of Dathomir riding Rancor. And quite honestly, it was a nice reference. We have a bunch of different events that lead up to this, but essentially we have a bike chase or speeder chase, whatever you want to call it, between the cyborgs and the mayor's right-hand man, I guess. And we see so much droid comedy. We have a protocol droid, which nearly gets hit by every speeder. We then have an astromech droid, which is hit off its cart by the mayoral speeder. We then see a pit droid that has to shrink down to not get hit by the speeder, and then we see a chauffeur droid who, rather than reversing, speeds up to avoid getting hit by the speeders. It's just a lot of droid humour, and I don't get it, but I'm sure somebody laughed, so that's all that matters. And that leads to finding out that, the mayor, who has been said to have given the rights to Tatooine, or at least Mos Espa, to a specific syndicate, it's revealed that he's given it to the Pikes. And the Pikes bring enough members of their syndicate to go to war. And Boba basically says, bring it on. And that's how it ends. these episodes are so weirdly put together, and I think it's because of the whole like backstory and flashback stuff that we see a lot. This episode was fine, and I'm happy that, well, I'm not necessarily happy that the Tuscan Raiders died, but I am happy that we're finally past the point of the Tuscan story being like a focus. You know, this was the shortest flashback to the Tuscans we've actually had this season, and quite honestly, I've had enough of them. I was happy with how much we saw of them in Mandalorian. I was happy we got to see a bit more of them in this, but they were starting to overstay their welcome. It was so much of the time was just following Tuscan Raiders, and quite honestly, I don't care about Tuscan Raiders. I never have. Yeah, I care more about Jawas than Tuscan Raiders, and that's quite honestly the truth. But yeah, when it comes to the Tuscans, I'm pretty sure we are done with them. I don't think we're going to see many more flashbacks to that time in Boba's life, because I think it's pretty much going to line up directly with the events of The Mandalorian. But, yeah. I don't really know what else to say on that, because realistically, that is the episode, and it's fine. I'm enjoying it enough. I want to see, if they're going to continue with the flashbacks, I want to see more Kamino. I want to see more about young Boba, because it's not really a side of Star Wars that we've seen too much of, beyond, you know, post Jango's death, because really that is all that we know about Boba. We know Boba from episode 2 onwards. I'd like to see a little bit before that. You know, he ages like a normal person, so it makes sense to be able to see earlier than episode 2, and we are kind of seeing that, but I just want to see more of it, quite honestly. But in any case, that is going to be it for this thoughts video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like it, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. This series is interesting. I don't know how to feel about it yet. I'm very mixed on Book of Boba Fett as a whole, but I'm gonna keep with it. Hopefully it gets better, or at least to a point where I'm like, this is actually, you know, a worthwhile piece of media. But for now, yeah, that's it, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye. It's been a long week. I feel like I could use a vacation.